Welcome to this edition of Davos Diaries. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and what a fantastic day it has been for Team NDTV in Davos at the World Economic Forum. We have ended up speaking to some of the most significant, impactful and biggest names from this playground of the thinkers and global elite. On the show, you are going to hear from the bosses of the IMF and the World Bank, top corporate leaders, including one Indian leader who was with US President Donald Trump in the previous evening, speaking about the future of the world. That and a lot more coming up on the show.
It's been a really busy World Economic Forum this time around in Davos, Switzerland, for all sorts of reasons, not least of all because of the concerns between the United States and Europe. But apart from that, the World Economic Forum looks at several issues. We look at education, we look at health, we look at artificial intelligence, and we look at the state of the world's economy. We've got a wonderful guest with us. Kristalina Georgieva is the MD of the International Monetary Fund, and we are delighted, ma'am, to have you in our studio.
My pleasure.
AI is something that has been a source of conversation here for quite some time. And I noticed that there was some mild differences, if you can call it that, between what you had suggested India was as an AI power and what the Minister Ashwini Vaishnav suggested as well. So where do you actually see India on the AI roadmap?
Let me put the record straight. We have admiration for India, for how India has developed over the last years in terms of fabulous reforms, in terms of building digital public infrastructure amazingly well, and in terms of the IT-skilled labor force. The fund believes that the prospects for India in AI are remarkable. And this small hiccup that we had was actually the moderator speculating on what we think, which actually I said straight that we think India is one of the major forces in developing AI. And why is this important? Because when we look at the prospects of AI to lift productivity and deliver higher growth, they are truly remarkable. We assess the potential for boosting global growth as a result of AI to up to 0.8% more. Now, India is a very dynamic economy already, and with AI, it would be even more so. And I am impressed by what I learned about the way India approaches AI to be competitive with those that are choosing other avenues. So bravo, India.
And you're going to be in India, I think, next month for the AI summit. Is that right?
Yes. And I'm very, very excited about going there. You know, over the last years at the fund, we have been consistently saying India is a bright spot on a somewhat cloudy global economic horizon. So I look forward to coming and seeing for myself how India progresses.
I know you have to run, but I must ask you, it's been quite a remarkable WEF this time around. Geopolitical tensions between Europe and the United States. But I did notice there was a bit of a climb down, that's my word, nobody else's, by the US president on Greenland. And the concern that we may be entering a scenario where there might even be the use of force is perhaps less, one would hope, than it was perhaps a few days back. That's my assessment. Where do you stand?
You're correct. What we have seen is that the risk of tariffs has been eliminated. Markets cheer. What I want to stress, though, is that even if this particular risk is no more, we are at a time of high uncertainty, and it is driven by geopolitics, by the technological advancements. We talked about AI. We expect a lot from AI, but what if these expectations do not materialize? What may then happen in financial markets? So it is a risky environment, and what we tell our members is, at the time of uncertainty, make sure that you have strong fundamentals, that your own house is in full order. And I admire India for being so focused exactly on that.
Ma'am, it's been wonderful speaking to you, and see you in New Delhi next month, hopefully. Thank you very much for speaking to NDTV.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, the MD of the International Monetary Fund telling us about AI, India's potential, and also a little bit on the broader geostrategic concerns the world lives in.
Start with something that was just announced, the Board of Peace, of which you're an executive member. How do you see this play out? Because everyone's wondering, okay, so President Trump's announced this Board of Peace. He's got people like you on the executive membership. What happens next?
The real thing to think about is not the structure or the Board of Peace or whatever. You should think that's important because you need to get the right political buy-in, which is what he's trying to do by getting political leaders of different countries to either decide to be part of it or not. That's their choice. But that's what he's trying to do. The real thing we're trying to figure out is this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually make a difference in Gaza and Palestine, in a region that has been disturbed for a long time. And if you add up the full Arab world together, there's 1 billion people living there. And Gaza has always been the Middle East, that Israel-Palestine issue has festered. Is this a chance to make a difference? You have a historic peace deal after 2.5 years of trauma for everyone, starting with the attacks that happened on Israel and then the war that happened after that. Deaths everywhere, hostages, you've seen the images. So I think the real issue is, can you turn the page? And can you come to a stage where Hamas actually disarms? That's the political side of this. But then once it's disarmed, can you create the opportunity for recreation, reconstruction, create a new life for these Palestinians, and therefore for the region around them? That's what I think about. The politics of this, I'm not into.
Let's leave the politics aside. Just in terms of governance architecture, there's a certain post-Second World War governance architecture. The World Bank and several other institutes were one way of looking at it. The other is that the United Nations, for example, now dysfunctional. So a new setup and architecture being created. Do you think it can effectively work?
This is an alternative to the UN. In fact, I think the president today was very clear to say 2 or 3 times, we're going to work with the UN on this. This is something that he said in the UN GA when I was sitting there in his opening speech. He said the UN is deeply relevant. It has huge potential. But is it living up to its potential? That's his view, and the view that many share on that topic. What I try and do is focus on what we are doing, right? At the end of the day, we're working not just with the US, but in this case with Europeans, with the Middle East, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Turks, to try and find a way of, can we be helpful? So we got this group together. They prepared a report that I shared with all my countries that are members, EU and the US included, and the Middle East, and including with people like Jared. And when they began to work on this idea, portions of that plan are useful. It's broken into 4 parts. Urban renewal and reconstruction. Obviously, you probably saw Jared's slide with the amount of rubble and unexploded ordnance and the work there. But then there's the aspect of bringing back people, the diaspora, as well as the people who have been there and need to be reskilled and given a chance to succeed. Then what role could the private sector play, and how will they be brought in, the banking system and the insurance system? And then how do you connect Palestine and Gaza to its neighbors? And you heard the announcement of the Rafah crossing reopening, but that's symbolic. At the end of the day, the connection I'm talking about is a real trade and digital connection between Palestine and its neighbors, including Israel and Egypt and the Saudis and the Gulf.
The World Bank.
That's the kind of work we brought out. I think we help with that.
The World Bank exists in a certain context where there's a rules-based order. What are you making of everything that's happened this past week and over the last several months in terms of tariff being used as a principal economic lever to influence policy?
Remember, we don't get involved with trade in that sense. We get involved with helping countries be competitive for trade. But the tools of trade, the WTO is a whole other organization. You'll get a much better thoughtful response to tariffs from Ngozi than you will from me. My view is very simple. My view is that actually, if you think about trade over the last 20 years, and if you bear with me for 2 minutes, I'll give you some interesting facts, which most people don't think about. In the last 20 years, global trade has quadrupled. The emerging markets, which is the countries we are interested in discussing, have actually gone from 20% of that to 40%. So their share has doubled while the trade has quadrupled, meaning the emerging markets are no longer a passenger. They are an integral part of the trade ecosystem. The second is regional and bilateral deals. India has a number of them, but many countries have them. In the same 20 years, they've gone from 135 roughly to 350 roughly, almost 3 times. In the last 10 years, 10 have been signed. 100 have been signed in the last 10 years. So if you think about it, the idea of not just relying on global trade, but also doing regional and bilateral deals has become important. Third factor, the opportunity for trade within a region is not understood properly. In Africa, intra-regional trade in Africa is only 15% of their trade. In South Asia, it's under 10. You know what it is in East and Southeast Asia? 50+%. I'm not talking about Europe, which is a combination. This is ASEAN. And so I think the opportunity for a lot of countries is to think about trade differently and to think about reducing your own tariffs, because a lot of the emerging markets actually have tariffs as well, and including India, but other countries too. And then the second part is, can you reduce your non-tariff barriers? You know, simplification of trade, digitization of trade, reducing border challenges, things of that nature. And then the third part of that is, if you do those two things well, can you also encourage competitiveness and investment in the right industries for your future? And I think India has done pretty well on a number of these, but the topic of trade I view from a different lens. I view from the fact that the emerging markets are now integral in trade, and you shouldn't allow yourself to get distracted by one discussion on tariffs here, which changes tomorrow.
What I love about the fact is that you're so out and about, trying to find out what's happening, wrapping your head around all the geopolitical issues. Donald Trump was here in Davos. What did you make of his speech? And you were among the few Indian businessmen who actually had an opportunity to be part of a meeting with him. How was that?
Predictable. I think everybody expected him to be going off script, and which he did. I think there's too much noise. And as Secretary Besant said, don't react to noise. Keep your calm. Things will get better. I believe that. In the end, U.S. is an important part of the world, one of the most economically powerful, militarily powerful nation. But it is still a democratic nation where if things go completely out of hand, things will start to come back. What is important is for the world to know the old world order has certainly shifted. Now, where will it land up? What new institutions will come through it? But something has to give now. Europe will have to come together as a voice. No more fragmented Europe and together through Brussels. It doesn't work. Have one voice. You can't have a situation where two leading heads of state have a strong reaction and two say, no, we must compromise. It doesn't work. Europe in the next 10 years would have made their own arrangements on defense, on security, on intelligence sharing, on satellites, GPS, but it will take 10 years. They have been, if I may say, Europe has been on a vacation. And when you come back from a vacation, you can either be very charged up to do things, or you can be in a lazy mode, not do much. What Trump has done is, I think, shake them up very hard. I think Europe is acting now.
Is there a method in the madness that you see, or do you only see madness?
There's a method. There's a method. Ask for the moon, settle for the stars.
How should India be dealing with Donald Trump, given the fact that he actually did impose the tariffs? In the case of Greenland, now he's pulled back against Europe, but in India, he's stuck with the tariffs. Kabhi-kabhi bolta rehta, aur badha dunga, and he's giving all kinds of threats. What's your sense as a corporate leader, how the country should be dealing with Donald Trump?
I would say India has dealt well, although I know there's a lot of people who criticize India could have done this, India could have done that. As I mentioned, I'm in the world of business, but I am also a student of geopolitics. I personally feel India has done well by keeping quiet, not reacting to the noise. Our leadership has had a lot of, calm, approach towards the whole issue. They engage. Foreign Minister Jaishankar, Piyush Goyal at every level. I had a chance to meet Secretary Howard Lutnick yesterday. You can see that underlying things are moving now. India is focused on the EU deal. Hopefully next week the EU deal should get inked, which is a really
How significant do you think that is? Ursula von der Leyen called this the mother of all deals. How significant would an India-EU free trade agreement be?
I think it'll be big, because EU needs a big country. China is not the natural choice. US is in a difficult situation. India, with 1.5 billion people, becomes a continent for Europe to have access to. And equally, over $25 trillion economy that EU jointly is meaningful for India. I would say this will be a good cushion for India and also gives it strength to negotiate with the US better.
Let's spend some time talking about the telecom sector back home and the developments that are taking place. And as a consumer, a lot of chatter around 6G in the Indian context and when it comes, what it means, how do consumers benefit and when does it start?
Look, with every generation of technology, you get higher speed and more capacity, lower latency. I mean, these are the three powerful elements. From 2G to 5G, that's where we have come. Today, you can do so much more stuff on your phone than you could ever do in the 2G era. With 6G, it becomes a completely new ecosystem where machines are talking to each other, where cars are talking to each other. I mean, it's a fully connected world. Latency is going to be super low, 10, 15 millisecond, which means robotic surgery. If there's a bleed during a robotic surgery remotely, things can be fixed very quickly. Space technology, data centers going up into space, lesser requirement of energy, energy efficiencies, and then you strap on top of that AI, and you know how things are going to play out. Robotics, millions of robots working all over the world, connected onto the 6G network. So 6G standard is going to produce lower latency, significantly higher speeds, and more capacity, and above all, very precise slicing of network. If you are doing something which is very critical, your service quality will be very different individually for that particular connection than the millions of the rest of the users who are doing YouTube or something else.
How are you looking at your rollout and build-up plans?
Well, 5G is still on the rollout phase. I think there's 2 more years of 5G saturation. 4G saturation is almost done now, which is very good. 6G is about 3 to 4 years away from first trials, and give it another 2-3 years after that. In our case, we are consumers of technology. We don't produce ourselves, but we are deeply attached to what's going on in the world. I was the chairman of GSMA, now Gopal, vice chairman of the GSMA CEO. We're connected to the world, tracking the technology trends. We will always bring technology in line with the rest of the world for our customers.
In the context of what happened in the aviation sector, there were lots of concerns raised by government and by citizens about duopolies. Now, a lot of effort has been made to prop up additional players in the telecom sector, but it's really essentially just the 2 big boys. How do you see that, and what do you think, not just from your own corporate lens, but if you zoom out also, what do you think should be done with a sector like the telecom sector so we don't end up in a duopolistic situation?
Look, I think one thing which is recognized by the political leadership is India's infrastructure, hard infrastructure, will take a long time. How to mitigate that, how to still get the economy going and fire up all engines was digital infrastructure. And that, I would say, has been tremendously done. The launch of 5G, the speed at which the government moved in giving us the spectrum, and more importantly, the danda that was on us, rollout. I think it's been the fastest rollout, despite the fact there's not much revenue. We fulfilled the task for India, knowing that this is required. And it's been the fastest rollout anywhere in the world. Fiber optic cables have been laid out, submarine cables have been put up, more space capacity has been created. But all this needs energy. Thankfully, India was also focused on renewable energy, other forms of energy. Energy is not a problem here in India today. Both these combined with a drop-in of the digital stack created the wonderful ecosystem of digital infrastructure. And now you can keep building roads and ports and airports which are carrying on. So I think that part has been very, very well done. And this industry requires a ton of capital to invest. You can't have 10 operators, each fighting for the piece. But you also can't have a monopoly. So the government is right in the wisdom to have 3 private players plus BSNL. But every player has to fight for its space and place. Vodafone Idea, which was the largest operator after the merger, has become a shadow of themselves. Government has given them a supporting hand. Let's see how far they can go.
Do you see any hope for them?
You always have to have hope. They have pockets of strengths, but they are behind by several years and several $1 billion, tens of thousands of crores needs to be invested in where us and Jio have taken the lead. So it'll really depend on the management. I mean, you'll have to ask them. Government has done the job. I think it's now for the company.
the highlight of the trip, in a sense, has been the presence of US President Donald Trump. He met with a select group of business leaders last evening, and we are speaking with one of the Indian contingent, Dr. Anish Shah of Mahindra Group with us. Dr. Shah, thank you so much for speaking with us. You know, I have to start by asking you what Trump was like in that business leaders meeting. Was it as fiery as his address on the World Economic Forum stage?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here in beautiful Davos. Nice blue skies, very calm and peaceful. We hope the world becomes like this as well as we go forward. With regard to your question for yesterday, it was clearly a privilege to be there. It was quite a group of CEOs. You could take the top 50 companies or the top 100 companies in the world, and most of the CEOs were there, including Tim Cook and Jensen Huang and Satya Nadella and a bunch of others. It was a good conversation. The speech was, I'd say, a fairly good one with business. Clearly not anywhere as close as fiery as the earlier one in the afternoon. But more than the speech, it was the interaction after that. And there were a few of us that did get a chance to shake hands with him, and I had a brief dialogue with him on the Mahindra Group as well, which was a good, positive dialogue from our standpoint. Just very friendly. I mentioned I was from the Mahindra Group, and he responded, good group, very good group, and he clearly knew about us and said, we need more like you. So it was a positive sign. We have been in the U.S. for over 30 years now. We assemble tractors in the U.S. We have 500 dealers. So it's one that we're recognized for. We were also the first after 25 years to set up an automotive plant in Detroit for off-road vehicles. And it is good to see us being recognized in the U.S. in some form. So it was overall a good experience. But more than this experience overall, Davos has in some ways regained its position as being the place where it's a platform for dialogues to happen. The spirit of dialogue is the theme for this year as well, and hopefully find solutions for the world. There were many other smaller group meetings which included leaders from other countries as well, and a number of others where business leaders were not part of. But this spirit of dialogue is one that places Davos back firmly on the map, and one that we clearly hope that, as I started, the world becomes as peaceful as the place around us today.
You make a very important point, because Davos, in that sense, was being seen as a playground for the global elite. Everyone comes to chill in the Alps for a week, but where other world platforms, international platforms, I feel maybe Davos has gone ahead. Did you get a sense from businessman Trump versus President Trump on what is happening with the India-US trade deal? Is there warmth there?
There was no conversation on the India-US trade deal in the discussion yesterday.
Do you get a sense that there is warmth between the two nations on a business platform?
That is our sense, and I am fairly optimistic that we shall get to some agreement. There's a long positive history across both countries, and beyond that, it is all about geopolitics, which I must say I'm not as much of an expert on.
Let's come back to domestic conversations then. You know, Dr. Anish, you and I have spoken in a car. Now we're speaking in the backdrop of the mountains. But some of the questions remain similar, because you run a very large group which has a huge footprint on the Indian economy. And we're speaking a few days ahead of the union budget. What do you think is the kind of messaging which needs to come in, especially as the world is in this phase of uncertainty?
The Indian economy is in a very good shape right now, and the actions that have been taken by the government over the past 12 months, more so the acceleration over the past 6 months, have really put the economy even stronger than what it was. We are seeing tremendous demand across automobile, tractors, our resorts, for our logistics business, for our real estate business. As you know, we operate in 70% of GDP for India, and we're seeing the economy in very, very strong shape. And I have gone on record saying that India will grow at 8% or 8 to 10% a year, possibly for the next 20 years. And we are seeing that happening at this point in time. So for us, it is stay the course. Continue to focus on capex, on infrastructure building, focus on the long term, which the last few budgets have, continue to maintain fiscal discipline, and that's all that the economy needs at this point in time.
In terms of impetus to industry, in some of the sectors that you are in, of course, there's already been the GST reform for automobiles, etc., that has helped. But in terms of more impetus to industry, what would you hope for?
At this point, a lot of impetus has been given.
Government's done what they need to do.
The private sector has to now do its bit. We have been adding capacity. We have been putting in a lot of capex. That needs to happen across more industries. As that does, the economy gets even stronger. And therefore, with a view on impetus, I would say the government has done what it has to do so far. The private sector has to do more now. In terms of ease of business, there is more to do. There has been a lot that has been done, but there is still more to do on that front, and that is essential because that will create stronger companies. And as we think about making India the manufacturing hub of the world, that's going to be a critical aspect in doing so.